I remember praying and saying, Jehovah, please, I don't want to take any blood. Please hear my prayer. Feel my aching body. Feel my spirit. I do not want to take any blood. Please, God, please. In the name of Jesus, I ask you to please heal me. The next morning, my blood level started to rise. There was no blood given. My blood level went from a 4, then a 5 to a 6. It continued to rise, and within the next 2 to 3 days, I was out of intensive care. No one can tell me that prayer does not change. No one can tell me that prayer does not heal. Our Lord listens to the sick. He listens to the feeble. And in that moment, in that space, I know my God was listening to me, because there was no other reason why my blood levels would have continued to rise the next day. So after healing from that, Lawrence, getting over that, realizing what I had survived, that was a true transitional point for me where I found God's love. I realized that I am important, that my voice is important, that my prayer matters, that who I am matters. And who am I to waste this opportunity and not help other women as God has just helped me through this experience? How dare I keep this to myself?
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we get the distinct pleasure and honor to speak to a brother or sister that's doing exceptional work in every field of human endeavor. And they share their God stories, the ways in which God has been at work in their life and the ways in which God has been at work through their work. And today is no different. I have my sister. Now, I say my sister, I'm preparing you guys in advance because we didn't talk about barbecue yet. We got St. Louis in the building. We got my sister, our sister, your sister, Miss Erica L. Taylor. What's going on, sis?
Hey, Lawrence. Oh, my goodness. You mentioned barbecue. Oh, my gosh. My vegan heart is starting to pulse right now because, barbecue, I used to have barbecue sauce running through my veins instead of blood. So I'm feeling you on that.
The funny thing is I wanted to put that out there to kind of set the scene because we know the documentaries we did. We know you done talked about the vegan lifestyle. We know this, Erica.
Okay.
But your birthplace, where you came into the world, was St. Louis, Missouri. Okay?
Yes.
And we understand that there's a story behind St. Louis. But without kind of wasting too much time, it is not a waste to talk about that, particularly for my people from Memphis and Kansas City. I'm grateful to have this conversation with you, I think, on a number of reasons. One, I love storytellers. You have been called and you have been gifted to be an exceptional storyteller. And I think because I think that's our Father's business. I believe God is the greatest storyteller of all time. If you and I spoke offline. Anyone who's following in his shadow and following that pattern, I'm just saying that they're like gift touters. But even beyond that, it's not just the fact that you have this skill to tell stories. I think it's like these uncovered, I always say like undersurface stories, what I would call. Like you're bringing to surface, you're a bring to light storyteller, right? And I'll go a little bit into detail why I say that. But for someone who does not know you, who is Miss Erica L. Taylor?
I am a God-fearing woman. I am a Black woman. I am a survivor. I am a thriver. I am a producer, a filmmaker, a wife, an aspiring mother, a believer, and extraordinary. Those are the words that I use to describe myself. And Lawrence, to be honest with you, it wasn't always easy to say those words about myself, especially when you describe yourself in a positive light. I've overcome a lot of obstacles, so it hasn't always been easy for me to say those things. And so I'm thankful for the moment to be able to say to you, Erica L. Taylor, aka Erica Taylor Davis, is extraordinary. That's who I am. I'm a woman who looks to God to help illuminate stories from other women, other people, people of color, people in underserved communities. I still hone my talent as a producer and now director to try to bring out those stories that are untold, our suffering, our capabilities, wonderful things about us as a people in our communities. And so I've decided to lend my talent to dedicating those stories to the world, to allowing people to see who we are, to see how extraordinary we are, to see the things that we've overcome, so that not only can we build compassion with one another, we can learn from one another, and we can grow from one another. And who I am as a woman and as a producer and a director is someone who wants to continuously grow that audience so that we can learn, so we can grow, we can connect. You know, I'm a curious person. I love to stay curious. I love to learn. I was just telling my husband recently that I believe that you truly can work on your talent as whatever it is that you're doing if you think outside of your living room, your neighborhood, your city, your state, and your country. As long as you expose yourself to more, you can be open to more ideas, you can contribute more to this world. And that's, a really big part of my core is wanting to stay curious and learn more and so that I can do more, basically.
Who did this? I love, part of what I even began with was just this under the surface. You tell the under the surface stories. And I think as you talk about it is the untold stories. I think so much of the human experience, I think if you talk about, those of the diaspora, there are so many untold stories. When we talk about those who've been marginalized, there's so many untold stories. So it seems like there's innumerable untold stories that are yet to be told. When did you recognize you had that superpower? Right. In some sense, I wonder if the superpower was really just the curiosity as a prerequisite. And you were just so curious and you just didn't know what to do with all these things that you took in. It's like, I gotta get this out. Like, when in your life would you realize, okay, this is like, I gotta talk about this. I want to be a part of creating this. Like, talk about the genesis of just your storytelling, kind of supernova power. Once you got a sense, like, okay, this is my thing.
It's so funny because I have described myself as a supernova. So I love that word. I'm a techie. And I'm a Trekkie, so
hey. So you and I, we're gonna get into it, but that was all the Lord. Go ahead.
Well, ironically, I would love to tell you that it was just from the spirit of curiosity that made me want to know more and to tell those stories. But it actually started when I was producing national radio for the Tom Joyner Morning Show. I was given the responsibility of producing for an audience of 10 million people, 10 million listeners. Almost you could go anywhere in the country and out of the country, and anyone of color would say, oh, I know who Tom Joyner Morning Show is. So it was a great responsibility. And as part of that responsibility, I wrote a segment called A Little Known Black History Fact that aired every single day on the show. And it was something that was started back in the 90s before I was there, but we worked on it a little bit more and enhanced the presentation of it and ability to find a different fact every day of the show. Now we're talking about a show that's running 365. Well, I would say with the exception of Sundays, it's running like 6 days a week. Yeah. So definitely wanted some fresh content every day. So I had to do a lot of research. And
ooh, that's pressure. That's pressure. Since you said like there's daily deadlines, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah. And Tom, while he is the fly jockey, so he also wanted to show exceptional. So we wanted to be exceptional for him and for our audience. So I made sure that I did my research and dug into some Black history facts that people did not know, and as I was writing about these things, of course, I was learning about them as well. So, I started to learn about, just people slaves who used to mail themselves to freedom. And, they just are really, really wild stories that are not told in schools. And so as I, learned more, I was like, oh my gosh, the world is so much bigger than what I thought it was. What else can I learn? What else can I know? And also to also realize that some teachers had contacted me and they were using that little known Black history fact as part of their curriculum in schools. And so that was just such a great honor to me as well to learn that. So it really, it made me want to really dig deeper into our culture. I think that was really the starting point for, me becoming curious about, hey, what else don't we know, that we weren't told? Let's crack open a book. Let's have some more conversations. And, it just continued to grow from there, to go on and extend that a little further. That curiosity was heightened once I decided to transition to television from radio. I moved from Dallas, Texas to Los Angeles in 2011. And within a year, I was producing a docuseries, which airs on TV One, called Unsung and Unsung Hollywood.
People know that. People know that. Great work. Great work.
And, I had the honor and the pleasure of sitting down with celebrities, with musicians, with actors, whole casts of shows and movies, talking with them deeply about their lives, their perspective, and what they learned along the way. Those stories can get pretty wild, as some of you may know. But, just hearing people talk about, how they got from one transition point to another and the things that they learned, it made me more curious to ask more questions about their background, about their spirituality, about what they learned, about how they utilized what they learned the next time an opportunity came. What have they done to help others along the way? Those kind of stories are really what drive me, not just as a producer, but as a person. Just knowing, how people grow. Even our pastor in our church that we attend here in Dallas, Texas, Concord Baptist Church, the slogan of the church is "We grow people." And, I think that that's just a phenomenal way of looking at life, is we are all growing, and in order for us to continue to grow, we have to stay curious. You have to want to know more.
I love this because, there's something about, I collect books and autobiographies and biographies. I love biographies. Like my biggest part of my collection in my library is I just love learning about people's lives. I always think about the transition from those who tell stories about others, those who help produce and create stories about others, to the time when sometimes it doesn't transition, and then sometimes it is, now what about my story? And so you now are kind of sitting, capturing stories. You're seeing how these people are sought growth, have gone through the journey, have been through the valley, have navigated so many things. When did you start to get a sense that my story, or parts of my story, I think are important for me to share?
It's interesting. I didn't really seek to tell my story so soon in my career. And it feels funny saying that, knowing that I've been a producer for 18 years, but I did not look to really put my story out there. It was just time. I had gone through some health issues and some challenges. And after everything that I went through, I just said to myself, my pain cannot be in vain. I have got to use this story to help other people, to help other women, to help other couples. And, by doing that, I'm helping myself. By doing that, I'm releasing the pain that I had, that was, years in the making, things that had happened to me. And I will continue to do that as well, because that story is pretty long. But, after so much had happened, I remember telling my husband and telling my production partner, I have to share this. I can't let this be in vain. And to be honest with you, to pinpoint exactly what I'm discussing, it was a miscarriage. What I had gone through years before that, leading up to that moment, it was inevitable that I had to share that story. I knew other people, other friends, other family members who had had miscarriages, but it's kind of one of those things where women don't really talk about it. People don't really talk about it, especially in the Black community. We don't really talk about these kinds of things. And I said, well, why not? Why are we not talking about this? Why are we not talking about what's causing this? Why are we not talking about that this is just one more layer of aggravation, of frustration that we are going through as a people? Why are we not discussing this? And so in that moment, I realized that telling my story had to be a part of me helping more women, helping to give a voice to the voiceless, helping me to expand that audience so that maybe we can do something to change what's going on with our bodies and our lives and our culture. This was inevitable for me. And that was the defining moment for me to continue on with telling my story. In addition to the fact that the original director of the first film that I produced, The Invisible Vegan, my production partner, Jasmine Leyva, she came to me and she said, hey, can you help me with this film? You know, I'm doing this film on veganism in the Black community. Now, this was back in 2015, which is when we started filming. And I said, sure, you know, during that time you're in LA, someone comes to you with a project, you know, you're very much like, yeah, sure, let's just see what goes on. Let's just see what can happen. And so, you know, we began filming. And as we were filming, I began to do more research. Here comes that mindset back from the little known Black history fact. Let me start reading. Let me start doing some more research, the more that I learn. And so as I started reading and I was experiencing some health symptoms myself, I said, oh my gosh, there is a connection between diet and women with uterine fibroid tumors, which is what I was suffering from. And so in that moment, you know, I said, oh my gosh, I started to build a connection, build a mental connection to storytelling and what was going on with me physically. So as we began to discuss things on camera with my struggle with fibroid tumors, and the conversation was opened up, women started to talk to me about their struggle. There was a smaller amount of women talking with me about it then because the film hadn't been released yet. But within 4 years, we released the film. It was out on Amazon Prime. And Jasmine had done some screenings as well, and myself is included. And women would be coming up to me. Women would be sending me messages on social media. They would be seeking me out on email, you know, through friends of mine. Thank you so much for telling your story. Thank you so much for kicking that off and for, you know, opening up a conversation that I was afraid to open up myself or to my family or to my doctor. I thought that I was alone in this. I thought that I could just suffer through it. And those words resonated with me, Lawrence. Those words said, okay, you have got to do something more. There are women out there suffering who are afraid to say something. They're just pushing through every single day, and they are afraid to talk about this publicly or with their doctors, and they just feel isolated. So, Erica, you are in a position to do something about it. What are you going to do?
Was this like the reason why I think this hits pretty hard? My sister, you know, has gone through fibroid surgery, has gone through that and navigated that, but it's not just my sister; it's all my sisters in the kingdom sense of the word. It's too many, many, and even this is before my conversation with our sister, you know, Coach Jessie and others who have navigated so much of this thing. It seems like a case of the curse is the cure, right? Meaning that in that moment, you're like, this is not in vain. I'm going to share my story, and then people are going to open up. But I can imagine it's almost like this Hannah-like dynamic of how did that affect your relationship with God in the early parts of it, right? How did you view God in that time? What was your conversation? Because I think many people from the outside could you can almost like, you know, try to summarize and synthesize to be like, look how God has worked. He's worked through the things that the things that you navigated through. You've helped to free up so many women. Yes, that, you know, that's where you get to, but obviously it's a journey. Anyone who knows their stories and walk with God, it's a journey. And so what were some moments that you were having with God or conversations you were having with God that one either set you on your path or kind of was just helping build up the courage, or even maybe made you didn't even think that you were going to go down this path because you're like, God, why?
Oh my goodness, Lawrence, we'd have to turn the clock back to when I first discovered the presence of the Holy Spirit. And I think that happened as a child. I had a bit of a challenged childhood, and my teenage years were mentally challenging for me. But if we even push forward beyond that, I think that the initial relationship with God was, God, please deliver me from this situation. And I promise you that I will never come back to it. I promise you that I will do everything I can to make this life work for me. And he kept his promise, as he always does. And so if you push forward in my life to when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, God saw me through an abusive relationship. And I was able to get through that with the Bible in hand. That is the only way I was able to get through that, including Christian therapy. And so at that moment in my life, I felt the presence of God. God was walking with me through that. Jesus was right there. He was helping me to turn the pages of the Bible and helping me to understand my worth, which is something that I hadn't truly understood. And so the walk began there, Lawrence. The walk began in the beginning when I had to understand that God loves me. And so for so many women, we are not there yet. That's the first place to start when you're trying to start your walk with God. And so I had to start in that moment. And so after being delivered from a very tough situation, I began to discover who Erica was. And so as I was discovering who I was, I was just kind of staying curious, like we discussed before, and, seeing how I could make this life work for me. I worked on myself professionally. I worked on myself physically. And, as I just, continued my growth journey, I began to get sick. And so those first times where I realized that there was something wrong, we're talking like back in 2008, when I was first diagnosed with fibroid tumors. I was still in my abusive relationship, and this is all things that I cover in my film as well. But being put in a space where you have to rely on God because the people around you are not, they are not for you, especially when you're going through a very difficult time. That is something that is a situation that God will use to strengthen your relationship with him. And that's exactly what he did. So that began a deeper walk with God, walking away from something that wasn't for me. And then also having to embrace the fact that there was something wrong with me physically that I didn't truly understand. The conversation about uterine fibroids was not widespread. It still isn't. But in 2008, it most certainly was not up for a lot of conversation among Black women in the doctor's office, in the OR, or in the ER. So it was a very confusing time for me. And as I continued to try to understand what was going on with me, or some years didn't even try to understand what was going on with me, just dealt with the symptoms, it was a very difficult situation as a woman, because not only was I transitioning where I was living, I think I told you that I was in Dallas and I moved to Los Angeles. So I was dealing with a transitional move. I was dealing with, heavy bleeding and not understanding what was going on with my body. And I knew that I wanted to be a mother. So let's just sit that there for a minute. So as I will be telling my story in the film, it wasn't until 2014 that I said, I cannot deal with these symptoms anymore. I was back and forth to the emergency room. The emergency room is not necessarily a friend to a woman with fibroid tumors. And so I remember a time when I sought out a clinical trial. At the time, I didn't have any health insurance. I was, living in California and didn't really know anyone but my coworkers. And I heard the clinical trial information on the Black radio station, like many women did during that time. And I went to the appointment for the clinical trial, and it was a really small room. And I remember the doctor coming in. It was a male doctor. He came in and he brought this girl with him that looked like she had never seen the inside of a medical facility. She looked terrified, and they looked like they just brought her off the street. I didn't know where this child came from, but he had to have a female presence in the room during my exam. Excuse me. And so I remember him doing the exam, and he just looked at me, and then he looked back at the screen, and then he looked at me again. And he said, honey, did anybody tell you? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, oh, honey, this is a doctor speaking like this. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you have so many tumors. I can't even identify how many you have. Your only option is to have a hysterectomy. I was 35 at the time. He said, your only option is to have a hysterectomy. Now, mind you, I had no man in my life. There was no talk of a child at that moment. And I was devastated. As far as I can remember, as a young girl, I wanted to be a mom. And so to hear that from someone was shocking. So I remember leaving that room. He said, you can't do the clinical trial. You've got too much going on. You need to go find another doctor. There's nothing I can do to help you, and you just need to have a hysterectomy. I remember going back to my car, Lawrence, and sitting there, and I was in tears. I felt at that moment that I had no hope. I felt at that moment that my life was over. And I called a friend who was an associate, and I just started crying. I didn't, that's all I could do. And all she could do was just apologize for the situation. So shortly thereafter, here comes the Affordable Care Act. And I was able to get some health insurance. And I was able to see a specialist a few months later. And this specialist took a look at my case. She examined my body, and she said, I can help you. I said, what now? She said, I can help you. She said, I can get rid of all these tumors, keep everything intact. I can help you. And I was beyond myself.
That's a God thing. That's a God thing.
Yeah. I was beyond myself. Yeah.
I want to hold this because we're in the thick, and I want to keep going with this piece. But I just think about so many women in the predicament you were in, who would have already went for that option, maybe reluctantly, not having resources, not having someone who at least saw at least the options more holistically on what you could do to find healing. But even just having the feeling like you have an advocate in that, right? Now you have a doctor that speaks that way, right? And then you have a situation like that. I think about number one. Number two, I had this conversation with one of our sisters, Jay Simmons, and I think there's, and I wonder, I think there's something to be said about God and his part of his plan for our lives, and also the redemption of our bodies. And I think part of what's intriguing about the work you do, not even talking about your journey physically, but also just the, how how providentially your work in the Invisible Vegan, how it all ties together to say, you know what, it's not only the spiritual, there's something physical that's happening, that's all connected. That I think by virtue of just the nature of the stuff that's happening in this world that our community goes through, by nature of the things of life, the stressors, the cortisol spike, and it just makes everything worse on top of the food. Do you feel at that time as well, as much as God was walking with you spiritually to navigate and protect you through what you were going through, there's also this physical redemption you felt? Did it feel like a spiritual experience of, okay, God, you're going to heal me, and you're also going to guide me to heal myself with the things that you've put around me?
Absolutely. I was hearing the option that I did not have to have a hysterectomy, and that won't be taken away from me. That ability to carry a child won't be taken away from me. As a woman, you can't imagine how that feels, how that redemption feels, how that feels to know that someone thinks that you are important enough to save, that you are important enough to, your life matters. That those kind of emotions are what I was feeling and have continued to feel every time that I have a physical or a mental triumph in my life. And it's undescribable. It really is. But honestly, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how that feeling, that redemption grew. When I had that surgery, it did not go well because I did have so many tumors. The surgery did not go well. I was in recovery. And I remember my mother saying that while I was sitting in recovery, I turned completely white, which, that's difficult. And she said I was rushed to intensive care and my body began hemorrhaging. And I don't clearly remember everything that happened. I remember little flashes of things that happened, but it was a good 24 hours before I woke up again. And I stayed in intensive care for 7 days. I was, in and out. My blood pressure was too high. My blood pressure was too low. My heart rate was too high. Things just were not working. And I remember the doctor coming in and saying, we're going to need to give you some blood because your blood level is so low. Now, one thing you may not know about me, Lawrence, is I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. And even though I was not practicing that religion anymore, I kind of held on to the practice of no blood because I just thought, honestly, I just did not want to do it. Even biblically speaking, outside of biblically speaking, I just did not want a blood transfusion. And so she, worked to try to get me to get this transfusion. Now, my parents were in the room the entire time I was in intensive care. They slept in a small window in the room, the two of them. And the minute they left, the doctor would come in and say, I really want to go ahead and get your consent to give you some blood. Because she knew that if my mother had heard her say that wasn't going to happen. And so she came in at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, woke me up. I was groggy. I was in a lot of medication. And she tried to ask me that again. I think I agreed and I scribbled something on a piece of paper. At that point, I was so weak and out of my mind and full of medication. I don't even know if that would have held up in court, to be honest with you. But I remember praying. And saying, Jehovah, please, I don't want to take any blood. Please hear my prayer. Feel my aching body. Feel my spirit. I do not want to take any blood. Please, God, please. In the name of Jesus, I ask you to please heal me. The next morning, my blood level started to rise. There was no blood given. My blood level went from a 4, then a 5 to a 6. It continued to rise. And within the next 2 to 3 days, I was out of intensive care. No one can tell me that prayer does not change. No one can tell me that prayer does not heal. Our Lord listens to the sick. He listens to the feeble. And in that moment, in that space, I know my God was listening to me because there was no other reason why my blood levels would have continued to rise the next day. So after healing from that, Lawrence, getting over that, realizing what I had survived, that was a true transitional point for me where I found God's love. I realized that I am important, that my voice is important, that my prayer matters, that who I am matters. And who am I to waste this opportunity and not help other women as God has just helped me through this experience? How dare I keep this to myself?
The why. There's nothing more. I just want to honor all that you shared. This is just, I always say, like, I like to just let this breathe a bit, the moment to breathe. I think one of the scariest things is to exist and not really be sure why you're here. I think there's so many people, in this time, this public health moment that's continuing, you could say, that there are people who had to stop. They weren't, their busyness couldn't fill in the void. And then they had to come to terms with, who am I? Who cares about me? Why do I matter? Why am I here? What am I doing? What is my worth? Things that your busyness could actually keep you away from actually asking. And we often separate that from suffering. And in some sense, you're like, God, you delivered me from that. I have a reason. Every day we get up and have breath, we have reason. But you're like, yo, God, only you could have done that. And because of this, and because I know there are many more people, women who are navigating this, who may not see that or may not experience that in the same way, I need to be a part of giving hope. Sis, I just think that in and of itself, beyond the story, giving hope, I believe just that reality of what, the importance of the why, and actually you finding it off perhaps in the unexpected moments, I think is so powerful. I wonder how this affects how you tell stories, right? Because I think as you're gifted, you've been gifted and anointed to tell stories, to be curious, to be able to retain a lot of information, and just to be able to feel more interested in the subject matter, and then also to be able to survive and thrive. I wonder, how has your approach to storytelling changed? Is it that you feel like you draw up more of the vulnerability? Is it that, like, just talk to us about how God has helped refine your skill, your art, and what you do?
Well, Lawrence, it's so interesting that you asked that question, because one of the things that I've learned in this path is that the first place that you have to learn how to tell a story is within. And because no one will know your experiences and what you've been through and what you overcome more than you. You are the expert storyteller for yourself. So once you get to know who you are as a person, and once you continue to focus inside, that helps you to tell other stories even more, because it helps you to reflect on your own experiences and ask the right questions of yourself so that you can ask the right questions to others. And that's been my journey. That's been, my journey of learning more about myself has opened me up to being more curious about other people. Because I went through what I went through, and I'm still going through the uterine fibroid journey, I can relate to the women that I'm speaking with. I'm not just telling a random story, that was assigned to me by an executive producer. I'm telling a story that I have lived. And so because I have lived this story, I'm able to talk with other women who are currently going through it, maybe answer some questions for them or clear up some confusion for them. But that most certainly I can relate to the emotions that they're having. So because I am constantly searching for a way to simplify my own consciousness and to walk in complete faith, it helps me become a better producer. It helps me to definitely seek out those subjects that I know that I can relate to, because as a producer or director, you need to be able to relate to the storyline that you are telling. You need to be able to feel that presence of that story in your spirit. So your career cannot live independent of your spirituality, no matter what religion you are. Your spirituality, your spirit has to guide whatever actions you do in your professional life.
That's a word.
And so that's how I focus and how I govern my career path and my professional my professional path.
There's so much gold in that. There's so much gold in that. I just, as the bring to surface, that there's a lot to excavate in that. Speaking of rhythm, what does rhythm look like for you now? Right? Because one of the things that I sit with around this conversation around fibroids and these challenges that some women are navigating, the driver of stress, the cortisol, how that affects the body, and then ultimately how your faith is a part of that journey, right? About the thing. Sometimes it's a personality that was just like control. And you can't control. Some part of it is just the nature of just family setup, isolation, work, stress. Like, how has that even made you how has it affected your rhythm? Like, what does your rhythm look like? But then also how you think about how you guide women in their journey. Because I find myself, especially as a brother, or even when I put on my ministerial hat, it's one of those things where it's just like, what can I say if in this context, the reason why she's so stressed is like, you're working too much, or you're doing this thing, but you understand it's survival. So like, it's like, somebody else got to say this, right? So like, how do you navigate your rhythm, and then ultimately, how does it affect the message that you share with women, given what you've learned?
Absolutely. Well, I will never ever say to anyone, I don't feel stress, or I don't know, I don't become stressful about anything going in my life. That would be a hypocrite if I said that. We all feel stress because there's things around us that we cannot control. But the important thing I think to remember is that the things that you cannot control, you should not stress about. Those things that are happening around you that other people do, because Lawrence, you cannot control other people. You can only control yourself, right? So you control your actions, you control how you respond to those stressful situations. One of the other conversations I've had about being a producer, when you're on set, whether it's a small or a big production, there is so much happening around you. There are so many things. There are so many things that are happening that you cannot control. There will be talent that shows up 30 minutes to an hour late. There will be makeup artists that cancel at the last minute. There will be, equipment that doesn't work when you're about to yell action. There's so many things that happen, and you get used to the inevitable. You get used to the unexpected happening. And so it's all in about how you respond to those things. So if you control your responses, then you can definitely take control of the environment around you to make sure that that doesn't go off the rails when something unexpected occurs. And I think that that's a philosophy that you can live by in your own life, not just on set or at work, but it's something you can live at home. You cannot control what your children do sometimes. I don't have any children, but I know, being a godmother, you cannot control what your kids do or what they say sometimes. And so you have to know where to go. And again, this is another opportunity to go within, which of there is God within. And so that's where you find that peace. That's where you find that serenity to help you deal with everything else that's going on around you. So one of the things I've learned, especially when I was living out in California, I learned how to meditate. Meditation is a very, very powerful tool that is something that you need to practice in order to hone that skill of meditation. And it's almost like riding a bike. If you haven't meditated in a while and you go back to it, you can pick it up just like that all over again. But what it does is it helps you to focus on the present. It helps you to focus on your breath. It helps you to focus on the stillness of life and to see all of God's creations around you, to appreciate all of God's creations around you. Because for some reason, when you do that, the stress seems to dissipate. It just doesn't feel like the world is ending at that moment anymore. When you just take the time to be still, the pastor says to you, be still. The Bible says, be still and know that I am God. That's what that is. It's you being still, hearing what God has created around you, the sounds that he's created around you, hearing what he created within you, the sound that is within you. Those practices of meditation that you can recall, even in a crowded room, you can recall those sounds and that feeling. That's what helps to get through those stressful moments. That's what helps me. And that's what I would recommend to other people who are most certainly in stressful situations.
Fam, I think for those who listen to me and watch me in these conversations, that even in that moment, I was sitting there like we're on the Calm app, where I was just like, be still to know that I am God, right? But those, seriously, it's something, especially during the pandemic, I even took on. Right. And this is even my quiet time. I have so structured time in the morning that it's just like, I don't look at my phone. I'll do this, but to slow me down, to be able to kind of reset and center. But that's so powerful and that's beautiful. You talked a bit about just the opportunities you have, even as we round things around the opportunities you've had to talk about your faith, right? And how often in the nature of the work, it doesn't necessarily present itself. I wonder how you navigate that with a God that there are guarantees and non-guarantees, right? Meaning there are promises, and then there are those things that God doesn't guarantee, right? And so in this conversation, it's like it's the reality to say that God can do this. God can heal you. But in some cases, God may not for some women. God can deliver, but in some cases it may not. How can you not talk about faith in around that? Or how have you been able to have conversations responsibly, encouraging women to have hope, encouraging women to recognize that without faith, like how do you have that conversation?
You cannot not involve faith in these conversations. Faith is pretty much all we have as imperfect individuals walking this universe, walking this earth. Faith is the driver of hope. Faith is the foundation for everything that we do, whether you want to admit it or not. Faith is there all the time. If you have an ounce of hope that something is going to happen in your life, whether it is as small as I hope I get a phone call to, I hope this cake turns out in the oven that I've just baked for the first time. You are using faith in everything that you do every single day. And so if you carry that faith to a greater, to more of a higher magnitude, if you carry that faith to something that you are hoping for, that you want, that you desire for your life, there's no mistaking that God is going to hear your faith. He's going to hear your heart. He reads our hearts, right? So faith has to be the foundation of everything that we do. But once you recognize that, because some of us don't realize, we don't recognize that faith is the foundation. If you don't recognize that faith is the foundation, you're constantly going to be stressed. You're always going to be looking to what can you do? What can you do to fix this problem? What can I fix? Sometimes you just need to be quiet and have faith. Pray. You need to pray. You need to be quiet. You need to have faith that God does not need your help. He needs you to do your works on the human, in the natural sense, but God just needs you to have faith in the supernatural so that he can do his works in your life. Especially in the world of entertainment, for many of us, most of us, whose names you do not know, we have to walk in faith and know that we are doing the right thing, because you may not get confirmation for many years. You may find yourself just doing and doing and doing, but you may not get confirmation that you're going to be what you envision yourself to be in this industry. You have to look to God for confirmation constantly that you're doing the right thing, that you're saying the right thing, that your projects are going to mean something. That has been definitely my experience. I have had to walk in faith so much because, number one, you won't have the money, you won't have the time, you won't have the resources, but you have the vision and you have the purpose. And those two things are the most powerful assets that you can have when you are looking to work on a project. Vision and purpose will drive you, but the foundation of that is faith.
Bam, I think, we obviously will share, if you've not seen much of the work that our sister has put out into the world, we will obviously share that. But I also think that it is not far-fetched for any of us who are listening and watching this to say that your gifting to even coach brothers and sisters on the journey of faith in entertainment, on the journey of faith of creating stories that are resonant to them and their challenges and the things that they've overcome, I think is perhaps something that may be down the line. And so I just want to put that there. This has been such a gift to me, and this won't be the only conversation we have. I guarantee this will not. But I feel more equipped and hopeful. One, being reminded that every single thing runs on faith, every single aspect of a day. And in some sense, you need to be proactive about it. Be proactive about saying, you know what, I don't know this, but I'm going to do my part and I'm just going to trust and I'm going to go from there. But also, I just think you've just equipped the listeners and the watchers with, nothing's wasted. Nothing's wasted. Nothing is wasted at all.
Nothing. And I wanted to add, Lawrence, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I live by Philippians 4, 6, and 7.
Oh, yes.
Paraphrase, worry about nothing, pray about everything. Let your requests be made known to God. I mean, there's so much to worry about in this world. We just got through an amazing pandemic. We're still going through it. People were worried just walking out the front door that, someone may infect them or they may infect someone else. So we have been in a spirit of fear and worry for so long. And so that scripture, Philippians 4:6 and 7, it really resonates to me. It hits home for everything that we have been experiencing on a larger scale in the past year, but what we also have yet to experience. Just really, truly understanding that prayer, how powerful prayer can be and faith can be in our lives.
Through prayer and petition and thanksgiving.
Yes.
In the spirit of thanksgiving, I thank God for you. I thank God for your story. I thank God that we have been providentially introduced. You are my sister. Your husband's my brother. And I'm so thankful for you. And I'm just praying that God continues to give you the energy, the vision, and the boldness to continue to share the stories that you have. And I think there's so many more. My sister, how do people support you? How do people connect with you? Just talk to us. How do they best connect with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I'm working on Red Alert, the Fight Against Fibroids documentary.
Yes.
We are entering the end phases of filming now, thank the Lord, after 2 years, which is actually a very short period for a documentary. And so we are fundraising continuously. So if anyone is interested in giving to that effort, they can go to redalertmovie.com. There is a big black give button on every page. You can just click that button, and you will also receive special credit within the film for any amount that you give. Anyone wishing to give us a larger amount, or any corporations or partners that want to be included, and maybe even do product placement within the film, they can definitely email us at info@redalertmovie.com. So please, info@redalertmovie.com, or go to our website and you can connect with us there as well. On social media, we are Red Alert Movie. Please feel free to join us on social media. We love to follow you back. We'd love to talk with women who may be experiencing fibroid symptoms and don't understand what's going on. I have places I can refer you to, physicians I can refer you to. We can have a conversation on DM, whatever's comfortable. I definitely encourage people to reach out to me at Red Alert Movie on Instagram, or Fibroid Movie on Twitter. And we're also on Facebook. So as long as you remember Red Alert Movie, you can find us anywhere. So
most definitely. Now we're gonna big this thing up. We're gonna big it up, and we have the faith that everything you need will be provided for this story to reach who it needs to reach. So my sister, I love you. We love you. We are for you and champion all that you do. We thank you for your life and just for your faithfulness to the story. All right. God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you, Morris. Thank you for being love and light to so many. Appreciate it. Love you guys too.
Take care.